The very top layer of the OSI model, layer 7, is called the application layer. And the application layer provides services to applications. But as we said, when you think about applications, you shouldn't think just about Word or Excel or PowerPoint. In fact, that's not the type of applications that we're talking about. What we're talking about are communication applications. But communication applications are applications that people use. In other words, at the application layer, you should be able to identify these types of applications and protocols as something that you use on a day-to-day basis. And there are some of these that are best to know, both for real life as well as for the test. They're best to know what the application is, what protocol it uses, and what port it uses. For example, HTTP, Hypertext Transfer Protocol, is used for browsing the World Wide Web. When we point and click around web pages, we're using HTTP. That's the protocol that we're using to find those web pages and to bring that content up onto the system. That uses port 80. What's a port? Well, a port is a logical place in a computer where an application is assumed to be run from, or where an application exists. And we have well-known ports, which are the types of ports that have a set address where they're assumed to be run from. We'll talk more about ports as we go through this training. But HTTP web browsing is port 80. FTP, File Transfer Protocol, uses ports 20 and 21. It uses port 20 to set up the data transfer, in other words, just sort of the overhead. And then it uses port 21 to actually transfer the data. So you should know, if somebody said FTP, you should be expecting for ports 20 and 21. Those are the well-known ports for File Transfer Protocol. SMTP, Simple Mail Transfer Protocol. It's for mail transfer through the Internet. Now, there are other protocols that are used to store and retrieve mail, such as POP3 or IMAP. We're not going to get into that in this training because this training doesn't go that deep into mail, right? Into sending mail through the Internet. But I'd highly recommend that you take a look at some of those protocols as well so that you understand how to set up email for someone. You would need to set SMTP, and then typically you need to set POP3 settings. There are more and more IMAP type of systems that are starting to come out. But SMTP, a good way to remember this is it does stand for Simple Mail Transfer Protocol. That's the technical, but a good way to remember it is it stands for sending mail to people. That way you can remember that it's actually the protocol that is used to send the mail through the system. And SMTP is always port 25. It's a good thing to know. Then there's Telnet. Telnet is sometimes an administrator's best friend. Telnet allows me to do remote control of computers and servers through a network connection. More and more, Telnet is being replaced by more sophisticated systems that offer more security. Some of these systems actually use Telnet, and then they just piggyback on Telnet to make it more secure. Other systems don't use Telnet at all. But you should know that Telnet is port 23. DNS is another application layer protocol. DNS is Domain Name System. And DNS is name resolution for host names to IP addresses. This is extremely important in the latest networks. They absolutely require it, such as Windows Server 2003, which absolutely requires host name resolution. We'll talk more about host names, and we'll talk more about IP hosts later on in this training. But you should know that DNS, Domain Name System, uses port 53. So when somebody talks about the application layer, or they talk about layer 7, they're talking about a layer at which the user is actually using an application that is used on a day-to-day basis, that people should know. At least administrators should know a little bit about what that application does in regards to communication. You might also hear application layer firewalls. You might hear that terminology, and what that is it's a firewall that works at the highest layer of the OSI model. So it actually can read all of the packet information. For example, an application layer firewall is capable of reading a document so that when it reads that document, it can determine whether there's any offensive language in that document that would cause that document to, not cause us to not to want to send that document through the network or through that firewall. So when we talk about application layer, just know that it is the very top layer of the OSI model, and it's where the entire data stream would be defined, and the application that the user is actually using, the communication application that the user is actually using, is at that layer. It's exposed at that layer. The next layer down, of course, would be the presentation layer. We'll talk about the presentation layer next.